Well, it may be hard to imagine a time when giant elephant-like animals were roaming the prairies of southern Louisiana.
But the bones of mastodons and other long extinct animals are turning up in coastal areas. Dave McNamara takes us to Jefferson Island in tonight's Heart of Louisiana.
Tens of thousands of years ago, the landscape of Louisiana was drastically different.
The water was tied up in the glaciers, so the oceans were about 300 to 400 feet lower than they are today. This would have been a high prairie area or a marshy prairie area.
With the Ice Age environment came megafauna, large animals, many of them now extinct.
Giant horned bison, camels, ground sloths that weighed over 3,000 pounds. They had tortoises that were the size of Volkswagens.
Mike Richard owns Rip Van Winkle Gardens on Jefferson Island, which sits on top of one of Louisiana's coastal salt domes.
It was a near catastrophe here on Lake Panier that led to the discovery of the first bones in 1980. It happened when a drilling rig out on the lake punched a hole in an underground salt mine.
All of the water from the ground and from the lake started running down into this borehole and quickly enlarged it to the point where billions of gallons of water were sucked into the mine.
For 10 hours, the land collapsed as the lake was sucked dry. When the large crater filled again with water, the upheaval along the shoreline revealed long buried skeletons. Richard first noticed what he thought was a rock jutting from an embankment. His 10-year-old son retrieved it.
He picked it up and he said, "Daddy, it's not a rock." He said, "It's a tooth." We found a piece of jawbone where the root socketed into that jawbone.
The giant molar came from the mouth of a mastodon, an animal that's been extinct for 10,000 years.
Well, mastodon's similar to an elephant. Here's a tusk that was in two pieces. And it's interesting that the working end of the tusk is convex. And it's obvious that they were used as a tool for uprooting plants.
This is the jawbone and teeth from a tapir, a hog-like animal. These teeth come from a large, ancient species of horse. When Richard was deepening this pond, he found more bones from another mastodon.
This large tusk measures almost 9 inches in diameter and originally was in excess of 6 feet long. They were just laying buried in the ground for the last 30,000 years at least.
Most of these animals disappeared from coastal Louisiana as the planet warmed. But today, if you dig in the right place, you might just find a piece of buried prehistoric treasure. With the Heart of Louisiana, Dave McNamara, Fox 8 Local First.
You can see the mastodon tusks and the bones of other prehistoric animals in the gift shop at Rip Van Winkle Gardens at Jefferson Island. For more information, log on to heartoflouisiana.com.